Hey class, just a quick overview of lesson 13. If you missed it or just need a brush up, this is just going to cover the main points that you need to know. So one main thing is we're going to be looking at congruency. Are two figures the same shape and same size? But instead of just looking at it or using patty paper, we're going to use measurements. To use measurements, we have to understand what corresponding points are. So corresponding points is if I take this shape and overlap it on this shape, where would the points land? So in this case, it said where's the corresponding point for E and F? So if I take my pen here, E is one spot away from A, so I'm going to put my E prime here. This is the corresponding point to E because it would be where it would overlap. So F would be about somewhere right here, just a little bit away from C, in this case, C prime. You would continue on and be able to find the corresponding from G prime going the opposite way. Where would G land? In this case, you can see in this diagram where the corresponding points are. On the last one, it asks you to come up with more. There are some more examples that you could have possibly come up with. So the main goal of this lesson, again, is to test congruence in figures, and we're using corresponding points. So in class, I asked students to explain how you know that these figures are congruent. Students said that this figure is congruent with this one because it's larger. They also went on to say that right here you will have two squares and here you would have two squares. But one thing I want to let you know is if we took two corresponding points and drew a line, for example, if I took a point here, let me make it bigger, and a point here, I need to find the corresponding points here. Example, this is corresponding to here. If I drew a line between each corresponding point, this measurement should match this measurement. And that's one way we can prove if they are congruent. On this activity of page 113, that's exactly what we just did. We are to go ahead and draw B, D, and E prime. So where would B correspond? And if you can tell, this shape is flipped. So B would go here. So I would take my pen and just mark my B prime. There you go. So for example, what it would look like, those are the corresponding points. B corresponds with B prime. E corresponds with E prime. And as you can see, this is a reflection. So where the corresponding points, it's still in the same spot. The shape is just turned in a different direction. So on this page of 113, it asks you to draw a line from A to D. So in this case, from A to D, and you would measure that from A prime to D prime to see if the shape had the same measurement. If they have the same measurement, you can test two more points. Here's an example, A and E. And if I go A prime and E prime, I would measure this with my ruler. Let's just say this was half an inch. This would have to be half an inch too for it to be congruent. They have to be the same measurements. The lengths are the same, so the ridge transformation was used, and that's what you would explain. For number 3, you will explain if the corresponding line segment with different lengths, okay? There's not corresponding line segment with different length because these are congruent. In this case, you were asked to see if these faces were congruent. Looking at it, the whole outer of the face is the same size, and so is this one. But looking in the inside, you can tell that the distance from the eye to the mouth would be different. Here to here, I can already see it's longer. Okay, you can even say, well, go from the front of the eye. This is a lot longer than here, so you can distinguish that this is not congruent, and you can use the measurement of that. So really quickly, two figures are congruent when there is a sequence of transformation. So if it was congruent, it had to have been a reflection, a rotation, or a translation. If they're not congruent, just as we saw, we can measure the corresponding points, a line from two corresponding points, and measure it on the second shape. If they're the same, then they are congruent. All right, so really quickly, you can tell if these two figures are congruent by measuring. Just looking at it, I can tell they're not, but if I were to measure, again, draw a line and measure, then I can prove that they are not congruent. Real quick overview for homework. Please use your patty paper and measure because they look the same, but not all of them are congruent. So when you explain, please make sure you are using your patty paper to test. For 2, you're doing the same thing as the classwork. You're going to find the corresponding point and you are going to connect them as said here. Are angles A, B, and C congruent? You're going to explain by measuring these. Go ahead and draw a line from B to C and you will measure. And from B prime to C prime and measure. You can also connect A and C. I know mine is kind of crooked. And connect this A and C and measure to see if they're congruent. You're going to do the same thing for these two, the oval and the circle. Last is number 4. Please check out the transformation videos if you're stuck, but use your patty paper and determine what transformations happen. Is it a translation, a rotation, and a reflection? And start with A. Don't forget to start with A. And if you say it's a rotation, try to put in that degrees and clockwise and counter. All right, class.